Tom Fox, back for another episode, and I'm absolutely thrilled today for two reasons. Number one, I have back Steve Vincze, noted compliance practitioner in the healthcare space. And equally important, it's to celebrate the publication of his book, Inspiring Integrity. So anytime I get to talk to an author, I'm doubly thrilled. So Steve, first of all, welcome back. Congratulations on the book, and thanks so much for visiting with me about it.
Thank you, Tom, and to your listeners. It's always a pleasure to interact with the leading podcaster in this space, and certainly yourself. And I look forward to sharing thoughts about my new book, which is a very exciting event for me, of course.
Could you remind our listeners about your professional background, and then we'll go into your current role, and then we'll go into the book?
Sure. So I've been practicing in the field of healthcare and life science compliance for over 25 years. I came to that role as an attorney, trained in the Marines, first as a Marine Corps combat officer, as an artillery officer, and then as a prosecutor, defense counsel, and later as a member of a joint staff in the Office of Secretary of Defense, Pentagon, and subsequent to that, as a professional staff member on Capitol Hill, working on a congressional committee, developing hearings, et cetera. And currently, after serving in-house at several positions, and most notably as the Chief Compliance Officer and Privacy Officer for TAP Pharmaceuticals, which in 2001 was the landmark case, the largest case up until that time at $885 million, that still sets the standard for commercial compliance and for which the OIG used as the case to develop their pharmaceutical compliance guidance. And then I went to Deloitte as a senior leader in the life science compliance space. And for the past 7.5 years, I've been leading my own firm, Trustful Compliance, where I serve as the founder, president, and CEO.
So let's go into the book, because I've written a few books. It is incredibly exciting. It can be incredibly nerve-wracking. It can be a lot of work. But at the end of the day, I say every book is a labor of love. So I want to start out with what led you, or why did you write this book, Steve?
If anyone's seen Saving Private Ryan, that incredible World War II movie with Tom Hanks and Matt Damon as the two leading stars, I heard Tom Hanks's words to Private Ryan in his dying words when he said, "Earn this." And I wanted to earn this, meaning my life, because it really came down to that. I'm a COVID survivor that was told upon admission to the hospital in March of 2020 by two Harvard doctors, one a professor and one his resident student. And this is an exact quote. "Mr. Vince, for patients like you, we have to tell you, we don't know how this will end for you. Have you had end-of-life discussions with your family?" And that was welcome to Beth Israel Hospital, Steve. And for 3 days, I literally did not know whether I would live or die. And on one particular day, I felt, okay, this is the moment of truth. And I had a very personal religious experience where I said, "Lord, if this is my time, so be it. I accept it." Because literally nobody knows. And if anyone does, you do. So with that in mind, I have an 8-year-old little girl who now just turned 13, who needs a dad. So P.S., if it's in your will, I'd love to live. And I fell asleep not knowing if I'd wake up. And literally I had to pinch myself the next day to see if this was real or not. And from that moment on, I was inspired by my daughter and by my faith to really leave my mark and make a difference. And upon that reflection of my life and my profession, I've really found that I wanted to leave a legacy, first and foremost to my daughter and my family, but then also to fellow practitioners, and share the lessons that I've learned, some of which the hard way, so that they can take advantage of those lessons and apply them in the future.
So I had one of those events once. I got taken out by a Hummer on a bicycle, and you can get some clarity from such moments. The audience Is it for a corporate compliance audience? Is it for a legal audience? Is it for the CEO who wants to learn audience? Is it all of the above? None of the above? Who did you write this for in addition to standing as a legacy uh, from Steve?
That's a great question, Tom. And it's intended for leaders and aspiring leaders. So really it's all of the above professionals that you mentioned, but is especially intended for current leaders, meaning board members, the C-suite, CEOs, general counsels, chief compliance officers, and people who aspire to those levels in business school and law school. And really anyone that wants to understand how do you connect with people and inspire and motivate them to do something, to do anything, but especially to do something that they may not want to do.
As I'm a complete, total, and utter geek in many areas, and writing is one of them. So I want to go into the weeds a little bit about your writing process, and I will intro it with I'm a morning person. I'm great till about 10 or 11. Once that lunch break hits, it's downhill from there. So I try to spend when I am in the creative process, that part of my day doing those things. What's your writing process? Is it formalized? Do you do better early or late? Or is it just when you have a few moments to?
I'm very much of a pattern person, whether that's with the workouts, with physical fitness, or writing, or studying. I need to get into a certain groove. And for me, it's generally I do preparation and pull ideas and thoughts together in the morning, and then I put pen to paper or finger to keyboard, generally in the afternoon and even late into the evening. I try to collect my thoughts, my ideas, ruminate over them, and then actually get to it more often later at night than in the morning. So I'm probably a little bit opposite to you, Tom.
See it in your head and then basically transfer it to the page via your fingers and the typing process? Do you have to cross-reference other sources to kind of put it all together? What about that part of your process? And I will intro that question with I kind of read everything, close my eyes, put it together in my head, and then try to get it on paper for at least the first draft.
Yes, and actually, this is an excellent discussion point because it goes to one of the main points of my book that we'll get to. Because Steve Jobs, I saw a clip of him when he was younger, talking about how you can't just take technology and push it on people, that you really need to understand the marketplace, and then you need to see how everything fits together. And that's a complex and difficult process. And I think writing a book and creating a compliance program, there are a lot of different moving parts, and it all has to fit and flow nicely together. And people like yourself and myself and Steve Jobs, who I think we're all sort of perfectionists, if I may sort of lump us all together, are very detail oriented. And it takes a lot of effort to first think of different pieces and components, but then to put it all together into a nice package that makes sense, that's integrated, that's cohesive, that has a clear message or a clear purpose in terms of a product or service. But yes, absolutely. For me, this certainly wasn't an overnight process. Writing the book itself took 4 years.
You're the first person to ever put my name and Steve Jobs' name in the same sentence. This clip may last forever. I will just tell you right now. Let me go to the book, and I want to start with, I don't want to say it was a throwaway line because there are no throwaway lines. I'm going to put it up on my screen so I can read it. But it just struck me that this line is a message I've heard you articulate, and it's a message that for me encapsulates compliance. And the line reads, quote, compliance is about doing what's right, not just what's required. And so that comes before the first chapter, which is on the role of leadership to inspire and motivate. So I really wanted to start with that. How do you continue to push that message or try to get that message out as, hey guys, it's about what's doing right? And does that message resonate?
Well, that came about realizing when I was in my first compliance role So I never served as a compliance officer when I took my first corporate job in Atlanta as a chief compliance officer. And I was literally learning OJT. And I realized that as a Washington lawyer at the time, as the way I was characterized, I was new to the private sector and actually categorized as a government guy, which shocked me because I never thought of myself that way. I was principally a military guy. But in any event, that compliance needed to be something more than just rules and regulations. It did not resonate with folks. As lawyers, we are fascinated, many of us, with how the law is created and the purpose of law and the rule of law and how that creates order and opportunity from the order. And so as I learned by practicing compliance, the thing that really struck me, and there's a quote in the very beginning of the book from Aristotle, that just reaching someone's rational side of their brain, their intellect, was not enough. And that compliance, first of all, came with a lot of baggage to begin with, a lot of negative baggage. The word itself makes me cringe when I hear it and it's applied to me. And certainly that's true of most non-lawyers and non-compliance people. So the big question for me was, how do you get people to want to comply? And how do you connect with people? And that's one of the main messages of the book. Certainly, there are very complex technical components of compliance, and they differ industry to industry. But the key components of a successful compliance program or effective program are fairly uniform industry to industry. But what people often forget, because of the pressures of the job, because they may be new to it, because of the urgency of the compliance situation that may be driving the need for the program, is that you're talking to people. And this is where it really becomes more of a leadership issue than a technical compliance one. Because at the end of the day, too many folks focus on all the effort to put in a program, all the different elements of the program, and not on the output, the outcome of the program, which is, of course, to make sure that no laws are broken, but even beyond that, that the business is successful. And that's one of, again, the key messages here is that being compliant for compliance sake is not only not inspiring and not motivating, but it doesn't work. Nobody wants to do that. I don't want to do that. So we don't get up in the morning to be compliant. I mean, so what do we get up in the morning for? It's to make a difference. And why do we join an organization, any organization, a group of human beings working together? It's hopefully, and I truly believe this, that most people are good people that want to live a good life, make a positive difference in the world, feed their families, etc. And so they need direction. They need a purpose that's clear and articulated. And again, we may be getting to this later in the interview, but most people look for that direction, and compliance should be an output. It should be an outcome of good leadership, of how do you inspire and motivate people for a certain purpose, a certain mission, certain cause. And then you rally them around that. And then you need to understand, how do you technically address the key legal requirements of whatever industry you're in, or whatever service or product that you're creating. And then how do you, again, connect with those people both rationally, but also emotionally as human beings? And so that's was a big realization that a lot of that often is lost in the hubbub of the corporate world, of the quarterly pressures to produce quarterly results, and then also with the fear of something going wrong, or something already has gone wrong, or something's gone wrong with another company that you're trying to prevent here, that we all too often people get overwhelmed and miss the point and just say, okay, what do the rules require? And again, that it's important to know, but you got to balance that in order for it to really take root, to stick, and really work in practice.
Steve, I've had about 2 or 3 major road to Damascus aha moments in compliance. And probably the first one is that, hey guys, this is a business process. This is not legal. Stop talking about legal, stop thinking about legal, and start talking about business. You frame it as, why are structure and framework so important? So I wanted to maybe get your thoughts on the framework and structure of a corporate compliance program, whether you see that as the foundation and then we lay over some of these principles of operationalization, or how do you approach that?
I think structure is critically important because my experience has been I've been called in to redesign and retrofit, recreate, improve compliance programs that have gone wrong, that didn't work. And as a result, the company was under federal criminal investigation. That's one case. And so, what I've seen all too often in reviewing what was done in the past is that often inexperienced attorneys were brought in to address a specific concern or issue, legal issue, and they focused like a laser on creating policies and training on that particular issue without incorporating it into a broader, holistic structure. Again, going back to Steve Jobs and his realization and understanding that you can't just focus on one issue and ensure that it seamlessly fits together. It takes hard work and it has to make sense. And so it has to really, the component pieces of a compliance program need to be clear, they need to be explained, and they need to resonate not just internally, but also externally with the folks that may be assessing your program. And we do have very clear guidance on the expectations of the US federal government when it comes to the component pieces of a compliance program. It also is a good way of rallying the executive team and everyone else in the company to understanding the why behind the what. Here's what we need, and here's why, and this is what's going to work. And again, one of the key talents of a compliance officer is to effectively A, understand that, and B, communicate it, and then finally gain consensus around that so that it's a clear path forward in terms of how do we make this work, again, not for compliance sake itself, but rather for the organization so it can do its mission successfully.
You have articulated what you call compliance principles. What do you see as the key essential compliance principles, Steve?
In that chapter of the book, what I was referring to are the 7 elements, which are the part of the structure and that lead into these principles that ensure proper leadership, proper structure, proper policies and procedures. At the end of the day, we can't and shouldn't get away from the fact that we're complying with laws and regulations. So there's an inherent legal component to that is necessary to address. And that, again, the government has some clear expectations based on the U.S. Sentencing Commission guidelines that were created. Again, it's important to understand the context of those guidelines. It's in a criminal sentencing of corporations and individuals, and these are meant to be mitigating steps in that process. So we never want to really get to that point, but again, we want to make sure we meet any of those expectations in place. By principles, I meant those 7 elements that are required.
Steve, I'm always fascinated by the role of the board in compliance. We have case law out of Delaware, which under generally called the Caremark doctrine, which creates one set of expectations. But the question I'm often asked by boards is, what is our role? Yes, you can train me on compliance. Yes, you can train me on the FCPA, but I want to know what's my role as a board member in a best practices compliance program. What do you see the role of the board being in the compliance structure?
3 words really come to mind, and the first 2 are perhaps the most important: active oversight, which equates to leadership. Again, setting the tone at the very top by the board. And the Caremark case, in Ray Caremark out of the Delaware Chancery Court, really found that it was the inaction of the board, the lack of action, that was the cause of the finding for liability in that case. I'm asked often by boards, does this mean that the business judgment rule has been undone? The answer is no. Had they taken any action, chances are the court would have deferred to the board. But in that case, there was no action taken, at least as I understand the case. And active oversight. So how do you do that? There are periodic ways that the board can be involved. And again, we can get into those details. The book discusses that, but active oversight is the key role of the board. And by being actively overseeing the compliance program and the business of the company, they demonstrate their leadership and commitment.
You have a great chapter around the 5-step process, or Steve's 5-step process, I should say, for creating an effective compliance program. And that may be one of the most intriguing. Why don't you spend a little time telling our audience about Steve's 5-step process and how you would help a company think through utilizing it?
One of the things that I advise people on is, and again, this goes to how you think about what you need to do to be successful, is to zoom in and zoom out this process. So let's zoom out. Let's start by looking at the big picture. And so the first step is define success and collaboratively and for the business, not just for compliance. What is the business trying to achieve and what does success look like? So that's step one. And then in that process of defining that, and it's critically important for the compliance leader to be aligned with those business objectives and that definition of what is success for the business, to then integrate compliance into that definition of success. And then to get specific, okay, so what does success look like from a compliance perspective in supporting this mission? So we talked last time about the Marine Corps. So think of the overall mission here of what we're trying to achieve, and then compliance is like the artillery in support of the overall mission of the infantry, for example, in that case. Step number two is then to collaboratively design an implementation strategy, a strategy. So what are the broad steps along a timeline, a period of time that we need to take to get to that level of success? So to be more specific, if you're a life sciences company and your definition of success is we're about to get FDA approval for our first product, success to us is being able to launch that product over the next 18 months. After approval, we're expecting approval in about 6 months, and then to launch it. How do we do that in a compliant way? And what are the then implementation strategy to get there? Step number three is to then map out a very detailed execution steps, a roadmap to do that. And by that, and this is something that I learned as a consultant and really appreciate that training from my Deloitte colleagues, is that you really map out a very detailed work plan where you address who does what, when, where, and how. And it's built-in flexibility, but again, you give clarity of execution. I reference in the book a book called Execution by a former CEO called Larry Bossidy. And one of the leadership lessons he writes about is that all too often leaders second guess their strategic decision. And sometimes you just have to go with what you decided and make it work and really focus on the execution. And that's where, again, in proper prior planning prevents poor performance spirit that we talked about in the last session, you want to plan appropriately and map out those steps, but then again, allow for flexibility, plan for the unforeseen. And so again, this builds a lot of credibility with your business colleagues because they've been trained to do that. And then the fourth step is execute, and then finally, measure and report results. Anything that's worth doing needs to be measured. And that's how you, again, gain credibility with the C-suite, with the board, and you report results regularly. You hold yourself to a high standard of accountability, of delivering on time, of performing within a set budget. Again, running the compliance department and program like the business and mirroring those kind of good, sound business practices within the program execution that any good business would do in its overall business. So those are the 5 steps there. Again, it's the emphasis on consensus building, on sharing a vision, defining it with some clarity and gaining consensus, and then executing it collaboratively together with the business so that you can ensure that everything moves forward crisply, collaboratively, collectively. And I've had great success in doing and following these 5 steps.
Steve, I think that I come out of the energy industry from my practice law. If you didn't, I did. And one thing very different about compliance in the energy industry and life science is around the issue of data privacy. And so I was particularly interested in you dedicating a chapter to that. And so I wanted to maybe ask you some of your thoughts around the role of privacy and compliance because it's so critical to your area of compliance.
Absolutely. The chapter talks about as privacy as the new compliance challenge in the life sciences, and that certainly has been accelerated with the whole COVID pandemic experience that we've all gone through. Just being on Zoom like this with you and these kind of virtual communications have made has changed our business life and our personal lives forever. I'm not sure we're ever going back to what was before. But relying on these kind of technologies creates new and risks. And in the life sciences, these risks pertain to very sensitive personal information. And the Office of Inspector General of the Department of Health and Human Services has put a re-emphasis on these kind of privacy concerns under HIPAA. And so while pharmaceutical companies per se are not considered covered entities as defined under HIPAA, nevertheless, they have the deep pockets that if anything goes wrong through their third-party vendors, and the way this tends to materialize is through patient support services, which has become a real premium and differentiator in the life sciences, where increasingly small biotech companies are focused on rare diseases, and many of these diseases, these therapies are injectables and require nurse practitioners and training with patients. And so you need to first get consent from these patients to be introduced to these nurse practitioners. So there's an exchange of information at that level. And then now, just as of May, there were 17 states. Now there are 19 states with enacted bills, passed bills addressing privacy requirements, healthcare privacy requirements, or just privacy requirements. Of course, the leading state was California and still is California, but this is a fast-moving area where these laws are coming online in January of 2025 in many states, and even as far forward as 2026. And so this is the new challenge. And the thing that I've saw here, particularly over the past few years since COVID, is that all sales and marketing of life sciences now integrate in some way these kind of virtual communications. And again, describing some of the technical aspects of patient therapies that invariably involve extraordinarily sensitive information if there's any breach. And so that's the other aspect, the threat environment, so to speak. All the various hackers and all the malicious activity out there, it's mind-boggling, really, whether on the financial scene or the healthcare scene. In other words, we're, as a society, under siege when it comes to privacy and information. So there's a real need for an appreciation of boards and of C-suite leaders that privacy and compliance really now go hand in hand. And a lot of colleagues that I've spoken to agree 100% that this is the new challenge facing compliance officers and senior leaders in companies, particularly in the life sciences industry.
Steve, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but before we leave, I certainly want to ask you, are you going to have some sort of book launch party? If so, where can people find out more information? Of course, we'll put that in the show notes. Is the book available for pre-order? If so, where they may be able to go, and then where after publication date they can go as well, or maybe even connect with you to find out more about you, your practice, and your book. So I know that's a lot, but where can they go?
Well, thank you, Tom. Yes, you can go to 2 websites, stevevince.com, www.stevevince.com. And it's the same spelling as you see here on the screen. And there you'll see information about how to order the book. You just click on, there's a link to take you to Amazon. And yes, you can pre-order it. The official publication date is November 12th. There will be a conference in Washington from October 28th to the 30th where I'll be speaking and also will be available. We'll have a limited number of copies of books. I did receive the first shipment, and here it is, that we'll be making available for purchase. There also, again, you can pre-order it. There will be an official book launch party, book launch cocktail reception event in Boston on Thursday, November 21st, the week before Thanksgiving. It'll be at the Quinn House in Boston, a private club. It's by invitation only, but if you're interested in attending, please email me directly at, svince@tresselcompliance.com, spelled the way it sounds. The other website is www.tresselcompliance.com. Either website will have contact information and clicks to the Amazon site. The other site where you can order the book, pre-order, is on Barnes & Noble. So both Barnes & Noble and Amazon have the book there. There are also several editorial reviews by some notable people, a former U.S. ambassador, a former leadership professor and retired three-star general in the U.S. Marine Corps, several CEOs and general counsels, current practitioners. So I've been very pleased with the reception, the initial reviews of the book. So encourage folks that are interested to contact me directly or to go directly to Amazon.
Steve, I am just thrilled for you. I'm thrilled for the compliance community to be able to purchase this book. I'm absolutely always thrilled to be able to visit with you. I hope we can continue this conversation, and congratulations.
Thank you, Tom. Always a pleasure to be with you. I really respect the work that you do as the leading podcaster on compliance. It's always an honor and a privilege to be your guest and to speak to your audience. And first and foremost, in addition to saying thank you, I want to say that you and others in the field certainly continue to inspire me. And I hope that my book and some of the words that I've shared serve to inspire others. At the end of the day, we all want to make a positive difference in the world, and hopefully all of us can do that.